All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sabrina. I'm the program director at the Eating Disorder Foundation in Denver, Colorado, and I'm thrilled to be here to introduce and to moderate this evening's workshop. We are recording tonight's session so that if you want to rewatch tonight, or if there are people who signed up who weren't able to make this time, it can be viewed again. If you'd like to, the recording will only record who's speaking. So if you're comfortable, you may leave your camera on. You can also turn your camera off. I will ask if everybody can keep their microphones on silent. That will allow our speakers to be viewed and recorded. And then at the end of the workshop, we're going to save time for questions. If you are having questions throughout the workshop, you're welcome to send those directly to me. I will send everyone a chat in just a moment, and I see I'm getting some as well. And then we'll make sure to get to some of those at the end. So, okay, so if you're not familiar, the Eating Disorder Foundation is a nonprofit that is located in Denver, Colorado. Our mission is to be an effective resource in the prevention and elimination of eating disorders through support, advocacy, and education. And even though we're located in Denver, we are very proud to be providing services such as support groups, a mentorship program, and educational services for free all over nationally and internationally right now. So if there's any additional interest in the services that we provide, or if anyone's out there today that's watching who is wanting to find more professional resources, that's something that we can help with as well. I will in a moment send an email and a link in the chat so that you can follow up if needed. And I wanted to quickly take a moment to say thank you to everyone who was able to provide and contribute a donation to the workshop when they registered. Really appreciated. Any amount and everything is always welcomed and appreciated so that EDF can maintain providing our services for free and expand our services. So thank you very much. All right, so I'm happy now. I'm going to introduce, we have two speakers this evening. We have Bonnie Brennan, who is a compassionate and mission-driven clinician and interventionist. Bonnie brings knowledge and leadership in the fields of addiction, of eating disorders, and mental health. Bonnie offers services in Colorado to individuals and to support families and caregivers using evidence-based interventions, groups, workshops, and is continuing care models nationwide. Bonnie has been working as a licensed clinician for over 20 years and is an engaging and compelling speaker, and is also one of our support group facilitators and volunteers. And I'm just very grateful for everything that she's done for this field and for being here tonight. And then we also have Kelli. Kelli is passionate about eating disorder recovery at any age, especially for those who are seeking recovery in midlife and beyond. Kelli shares her own story in recovery to encourage and offer hope that true recovery is certainly possible. So I'm going to send both Bonnie's and Kelli's information, as they have websites and blogs and additional services and information, so that you can follow up with them as well. And I want to check to see if Bonnie has logged in, if we are set to go. And
I'm here, Sabrina.
Hi, Bonnie. Okay, and Kelli. So I'm gonna, if I don't think I've missed anything, I'm going to pass over to Bonnie and Kelli. And then let me know when you're ready for questions, and I'll be chatting with people in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up. Yes. Okay, good. And one thing, if you're on the screen and you want to change your view so that it's a speaker view rather than a gallery view, that could be less distracting than looking at all the the gallery view has all the tiles. So speaker view, I find when I'm watching speakers to be more helpful. And you could do that by, if you're on your computer, I think it's in the top right-hand corner, there'll be a little icon that says view. So welcome everyone, so excited to be talking with you about the beauty of eating disorder recovery in midlife. This group, this talk was really born out of Eating Disorder Foundation group. So when I was volunteering in the 30 plus group and running that group that they do that twice a week, I saw, wow, I just noticed that there's a lot of folks here that are actually probably 50 and over, and maybe we can add a group that is a 50 plus group as well. So we added that several months ago. It's been going strong. Shout out to everyone here who's in the 30 plus group or 50 plus group. I'm so happy to see you. And if you're watching the recording later, thank you so much. And they, just really a fantastic group of human beings that have been talking about some of the things that we're going to bring up tonight. Kelly's going to address, and I'll talk about as a professional. But in case you didn't know, eating disorders, they affect about 9% of the population worldwide, and about 28.8 million Americans struggle with an eating disorder at some point in their life. And it has the highest mortality rate, second only to opioid overdose. Used to have the highest mortality rate, and then it's just a couple of years ago, the opioid crisis surpassed that. So really a serious issue. And eating disorders affect every race, every gender, and every age group. And an often overlooked age group is folks who are in midlife and struggling with an eating disorder. We tend to think about, is it the 18 to 24? No, there's a lot of individuals that are struggling with their eating disorder in midlife. So I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to reach out through the Eating Disorder Foundation and have some evidence for all of you, someone with lived experience. Can you recover from an eating disorder in midlife? And I have somebody who can talk to that right here. So I'm going to have Kelli introduce herself. Welcome, Kelli.
Thanks, Bonnie. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And, I just want to put a plug in for EDF also. They're just so important in what they do. And they help so many people, not just in the Denver area, but worldwide now. And I just want to thank you for making this possible tonight for Bonnie and I to share. I'm going to just give you a little background on myself and how my eating disorder started. But most of what Bonnie and I want to talk about tonight is recovery, right? And the essence of that and what it is, especially for those of us in midlife. I'm going to be 55 in just a few weeks. Yeah. So I struggled with my eating disorder for a long, long time. I grew up in a very chaotic and traumatic and abusive family. And my eating disorder started when I was about 16. And I think it speaks probably to all of our stories that, when we maybe were younger, we didn't have, we didn't have computers, we didn't have iPhones, we didn't have social media. I was very, I grew up in a very sheltered home, oldest of 8 kids, very controlled. And I didn't see my friends, with an eating disorder, and that's how I learned. I didn't see it in magazines. I didn't see it on any, social media or anything. It just kind of happened. And I think that speaks to the genetic component of eating disorders and how that plays into, people who do have eating disorders, that genetic component. I started around 16, with anorexia, and I thought it was to me to keep being successful in everything that I was trying to accomplish, athletics, academics, all music, all of it. And I thought, I thought that it would help me. And I very quickly learned that no, it wasn't helping me at all. In fact, it was, you know, becoming something in my life that was very detrimental. I didn't have anybody come alongside me really and say, hey, we need to get you help. My mom and dad didn't do that. And I didn't grow up in a nurturing environment, you know, where feelings were spoken about. I didn't, I grew up with a lot of fear and a lot of shame. I was a kid that cried myself to sleep a lot at night. I had a deep sadness even as a young child, and I didn't really understand why. I just knew that I cried a lot at night when I was asleep, and I couldn't let anybody know that. All of my feelings I kept inside. You know, I was diagnosed with an ulcer at 12 years old, you know, and that just speaks to everything that I was trying to hide inside, and control my feelings. And I was super hyper vigilant growing up because as the oldest of 8 kids, I felt it was my responsibility to take care of my siblings when my mom would rage. And that I thought I could, you know, think ahead of every situation and make sure that all of us were going to be okay, either physically or emotionally. And there was even sexual abuse in the home that I grew up in. So when I went to college, you know, I kind of thought, okay, I can, new scenery, it'll go away. Well, it didn't. And I started drinking and I started abusing alcohol a lot. I engaged in a lot of self-harm. And looking back, it was how I was trying to control all the chaos inside of me. And I was trying to achieve things so that I thought if other people saw that I was good at something, then I could feel okay. And that's really everything that my life kind of wrapped around, was trying to be successful and achieve perfection so that I could feel just okay. You know, but the thing about perfectionism is, you know, there's never an ending point. There's always, it's a moving end point, right? Like it's never enough. And so I grew up with a lot of shame. I grew up with tons of fear. I was always afraid of everything. And I went to graduate school after college, but in college I did go to an eating disorder treatment center. That was kind of just a new thing back then in the 80s that was kind of getting started. And I got better, right? I was able to gain some ground in not having my behaviors be like, you know, as intense as they were. But I didn't really understand what it meant to be well. And I certainly didn't understand that recovery was going to be an inside job. Better is certainly on the way to well, but well needs to be our end. You know, that's what I want in recovery, is wellness and wholeness. And I wasn't able to grab hold of that. I went to treatment again when I was in graduate school. I was in the hospital after a suicide attempt. And in my 30s, you know, I was married, had 2 kids, really tried to pursue perfectionism again. Ran a lot of marathons, half marathons, duathlons, tried to be the best at everything in my career, in the community, you know, my kids' schools. And towards the end of my 30s, things kind of started to fall apart, because that's what happens when I chose perfectionism as what I wanted to chase after. And my drinking got really bad again. Self-harm was bad. I was abusing some pills, and I ended up in treatment again at the age of 42. And that's really when I had to come face to face with, you know, what do I want in life, you know? And I decided that I would do whatever I had to do to become well. It wasn't easy, and I didn't have a lot of willingness and a lot of hope when I went to treatment at 42. And I think it's hard when we're in midlife, right, to seek after help and to have hope, because I know I felt like I already had my chance, right? And I you know, why should I be able to seek recovery in middle age? And because I I was successful in everything that I did except trying to get rid of this eating disorder. And so that little bit of willingness and hope, I really did it initially for my kids and my husband. My kids were 8 and 13. And eventually that kind of turned around to I was going to do it for me. But that's how it started. Just a little bit of willingness, just a little bit of help, willingness to kind of let other people come alongside me. And so that's just a little bit of my story. You know, I love, and it really is my passion to do things like this because I have a strong passion for middle-aged and older people as we navigate life and with an eating disorder or in recovery from an eating disorder, because, you know, I think there's another level of shame for us when we're in middle age. You know, it's not a 20-something disease like everybody seems to think, or an adolescent. And so for us to become willing to seek recovery at our age, you know, there's a lot of shame we have to overcome. And, you know, that's why I'm just grateful to be here to share my story and have Bonnie, you know, give the professional aspect to recovery from eating disorders also.
Thanks, Kelli. You know, one thing that I would say at least once a week, not just in the group that I do, but at least once a week, someone will call and say, I'm 50 years old, I'm 60 years old. Is it even possible for me to recover? And that's one thing we wanted to give to everyone tonight, is that the recovery absolutely is possible. 100%, it is possible. And each one of you is worthy of recovery. And I know, Kelli, you wanted to share something about that.
Yeah, you know, that was one of the biggest things that I thought when I entered recovery, started my recovery at 42, was like, am I even worthy of seeking a life where I can be happy, where I can be whole, where I can feel content? It seemed, all those things seemed far off, like, and that I somehow wasn't worthy of that. Either, you know, because I thought I'd already had my chance and blown it, or I was, you know, too set in my ways that it was going to be too hard. But I really, you know, with a lot of help from a lot of people, I had to hang on to the thought that recovery is possible at any age, and I am worthy of recovery no matter my age. And that's true for all of us.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of times I think people think, well, my body's too far gone. I've had my eating disorder for too long. Can I even heal? And I want to tell you that the body is an amazing thing. It can absolutely heal. All the organ systems can heal from an eating disorder. The thing that might be affected is if you've had bone loss, osteoporosis, or osteopenia. But aside from that, unless you've had surgeries or something, the body can do miraculous things and can heal itself, and so can the brain.
Yeah, you know, Bonnie, I totally agree with you. You know, there were some things health-wise that I had to look at when I sought recovery, and even these last 12 and a half years, right, in my recovery journey, you know, health things have come up. And but you're right, the body can really, really heal itself, but the brain especially, right? I love the field of neurobiology, and I began to look at my recovery journey as a brain restoration, a brain rescue journey, because I had to see or visualize my brain beginning to look at things differently, to making new neural pathways, to thinking differently. And you know, I'll throw this out here too. I had to do some weight restoration, right? And I needed a lot of help with that. And people would tell me, you know, once you come to a healthy weight and you maintain that, your brain is going to start, you know, acting differently, running differently, and you're going to start thinking differently. And I was like, oh no, that can't be, that cannot be. But I will tell you from experience that that is the truth. My brain started thinking differently. You know, my black and white thinking got better. My anxiety, my time that I wasn't reacting. I was able to, you know, kind of do what I wanted to in a situation. I wasn't just reacting with my eating disorder. So yeah, the brain really can restore and you know, begin to function differently.
Well, and those of you who know me know my love for acceptance and commitment therapy. It's one of the most well-researched transdiagnostic therapies that we have. And the reason I love it so much is because it studies the processes by which we get well. Instead of what not to do, it studies what to do. And one of those processes is to change perspective. And we know that when you practice a change in perspective, it can lead you towards who and what is important to you and a sense of wellness. And that can come, perspective change can come, like Kelly's saying, from weight restoration, from alliance with a therapeutic team, from all different angles. But that would be something too, that when you're in midlife, you have an opportunity. I think a uniqueness is that you have had enough time in your life, that you've had more perspectives on things than somebody who is maybe, you know, 14, 15 years old and just seeing life for the first time. So that's to your advantage in terms of being able to see perspectives, know how other people think and operate, and act in acceptance commitment therapy. We ask the question, are you willing? Are you willing to acknowledge that there may be a perspective or an opportunity or a change that neither you nor I know what it's going to be, but that the world is going to change and you might have another way of looking at things and being in this world. And Kelly, you had said something about one of those perspectives for you was shifting from shame and fear.
Yeah, I had to be willing to look at those things in my life. Shame and fear was kind of like how I grew up. It was so deeply inside of myself from the trauma and the abuse that I grew up with, and the fear. And I had to be willing to, you know, work with people who could help me through that, to start to see things differently and not through the lens of shame and not through the lens of fear. I worked many years with a trauma therapist, right, who helped me work through a lot of those things that happened early in my life. And that caused me so much shame. And it really is a new way of living for me, not living life and seeing everything through the lens of my shame and my fear. But it really does come down to willingness, my willingness to consider that there's a different way, right? A willingness to consider that perhaps my identity isn't really in all the things that I think it is, you know, my achievements, my body, how it looks, my age, all of those things, to consider that my identity is something different than what I've held for many years.
Yeah, I think oftentimes too, we're trying to chase away emotional experiences that are difficult to face.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, emotions do not have an expiration date. You can feel something intensely. It can take you to your knees from when you were 6 years old or 7 years old. Like, you know, you're there when you can smell, hear, taste, the whole scenario again. And I know from a lot of years of treating eating disorders that it's one of the ways that an eating disorder functions is to help to regulate, get rid of, distract from emotional experiences that are difficult and have not been processed.
Yeah, and for me that was so true. You know, we carry our emotions in our body, and as an example, I didn't tell anyone till I was 43 years old that I had been sexually molested by more than one person. Now that's a really long time to not breathe a word of that to another soul on this planet, and to have the willingness and the courage to look at that, right, and to use my voice and talk about that, really became the backbone of my recovery, to kind of unpack everything, and have people help me along in that journey of unpacking it.
It's so well said. Like maintenance of an eating disorder is hinged on avoidance of emotions. So, hey, come to therapy with Bonnie. We'll have some emotions. I guarantee you, it'll be good for you, and emotions that are good as well. You know, so we talked in our 50+ group about the avoidance of joy. That even joy is difficult to feel. Like there's the theme of not deserving, of not having finished enough. Is it time for joy yet? If I feel joy, then I'm reminded of the possibility of losing that and how painful it would be to not have that thing that gives me joy.
Yeah. I'm just going to interject, you know, I dealt with that for a long, long time. Like when I started to gain a little traction in recovery and I'd feel joy and happiness, you know, or contentment, I'd be like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? Like it's new sensations, it's new feelings, but that's what comes along. That's the beauty of recovery, is things come along, and as we keep going, we kind of settle into being joyful and saying, okay, this is okay. I can like this and I deserve it.
Yeah, one of the things that Kelli and I talked about that we wanted to make sure that, you know, for those of you who are in midlife and, you know, maybe in the battle with recovery, walking the journey lightly, maybe even just considering today, is this for me or not? That you really bring a lot of strengths, and there's some unique themes of folks who are in midlife recovery. So you had a few of those, Kelli, you wanted to share.
Yeah, you know, when I first started my recovery journey at 42, I kind of thought my age was a liability. And what I've come to learn as it's definitely an asset. You know, it's an asset. We bring a lot of life experience, right? We've seen a lot of stuff in our lives, and that experience, you know, gives us a broader sense of what can be and what is. And maturity, you know, just the maturity of our age. We are definitely in a different maturity stage than, say, someone that's 20 years old, right? And so that maturity can also be used to our benefit. I think sometimes we often have a greater clarity of what we want, you know, our values. We know, sometimes, not always. I had to learn what some of my values were once I started my recovery journey. But in general, I think we have a better sense of what we want. We may be, I know I was too afraid to go after them. I had a lot of shame and didn't think I deserved those values and the things that I desired. But I think we do have clarity and maybe a better sense of what those things that we would love to have in our life.
Yeah, with time and living of life, I used to say that in my 20s, it was all about like rushing ahead and going into doing the things that I thought that I wanted to do, that I thought were my values, and like getting really up close and being like, oh no, that's not for me, right? We've had enough time to actually feel in our bodies the things that are important. And one of those ways of feeling in your body to know what's important and what's not is the stuff that you feel pain about. So we don't hurt about things that we don't care about. So the stuff that you carry with you that's painful, that's hard, that gives you a clue as to what's important too. You know, and I see in the group, in the 30+ group and the 50+ group with the Eating Disorder Foundation, such clarity and maturity, you know, and then also recognition of each other. So another really cool thing to see is that the folks who are in midlife with the eating disorder also know each other very well, in a sense, like that there's a level of compassion and understanding that I just don't see as prevalent. And not that the young folks aren't getting it, but it's certainly, I really keep coming to group, everyone, because you're really helping each other with your understanding of what it's like to go through it. We had some stressors, Kelli. You know, we were talking about some of the unique things I think I hear in conversation is, and I want, for those of you who are professionals in the field or family members who are attending, just to know that some of the things that that come up when someone's trying to recover in midlife are worries about career. Oftentimes the person who's in midlife with an eating disorder has super resilient, survived really long, and probably has a pretty good career going behind them too. They may have had recent divorce, empty nest, the kids leaving the house, what am I gonna do now? And loss of loved ones. So oftentimes we're in this transition stage of caring for children, and then also our parents, or maybe losing parents along the way. Sometimes folks have an eating disorder in midlife that's triggered by a medical issue, right? Needing to go in, not being able to eat, being able, having to undergo some kind of surgery that then they find that, oh gosh, I'm having a difficult time eating, or maybe regulating my intake and output. And then there's the big M for women. You know what the big M is, Kelli?
Oh yeah, menopause. And I can say I'm at that age where, perimenopause and into menopause, I've had to deal with that in the last few years, and that is, it is not easy. And that has its own set of things. And what I found, like in perimenopause and in menopause now, is things even from my childhood, right, come up. It's almost like another time in life that we look at who we are, right? Because things are changing in our bodies. And I really, like Bonnie was saying, there's a lot of stressors for those of us who are in midlife. And I think too often, those of us in midlife and older years, we think we have to be everything to everybody, right? We take care of our kids, we take care of our aging parents, we have a career, all of those things. And it's really one of the hardest things, I think it was for me, to step back from all of my responsibilities and realize I don't have to take care of everybody in my world, right? I can ask for help for all of the things that, are demanded from me. I don't have to do it alone. And there's so many things, I think, by the time we get to this age that we've gone through that really can be hard. My kid's graduating. I have a son that's going to be a senior in college, right? And that's going to be a big thing when he graduates college next spring. Is like, whoa, like I knew I was done parenting, but like my kids are out of college now. I have grandkids. I have 2 grandkids. That kind of puts a perspective on life too. Like, wow, retiring from careers, that can be something really hard. I retired after 30 years being a physical therapist last fall. And I'm telling you, I really had to kind of do some self-talk and get help from people, because a big chunk of my life, right, I was saying, okay, I'm ending this. And it was on my terms, but it's a big change. And so there's just a lot of midlife stressors, and all of them can flare an eating disorder up again. It can actually start an eating disorder in midlife. But things in midlife kind of get more pronounced, and we have to kind of like reevaluate ourselves again too.
Yeah, that's a common theme I've heard too, is like, I thought I had this, I struggled when I was younger, and I thought I had everything under control. But let me tell you what, all of you who are struggling right now, the hardest thing to recover from an eating disorder, for substance use or an alcoholic, we can take the substance away, but you have a challenge with being with food and in your body, which you can never take away. It's almost like we are asking you, as if you were an alcoholic, to walk into the bar and I put a bottle of Jack Daniels in front of you and say, hey, learn to have a healthy relationship with this bottle of alcohol. That's what eating disorder recovery is about. You're having to learn how to have a healthy relationship with food, and it's hard. So that you've got that option for the rest of your life, because what you did in the past, the food and the body struggles, could come up in your mind when things get rough in the future, right? So folks might find themselves like sliding back into eating disorder behaviors when some of these life stressors are coming up in midlife. And I don't know about those of you who have been through menopause, but for me, menopause was like going through puberty backwards, you know, like pregnancy, that's a whole nother thing. But all the stuff that came up about my body changing in puberty came up again when I was going through menopause. And so if it feels like, why do I feel like I'm 14 again emotionally? It may be because of that. I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm just going to put a plug in here for find help with that. You know, I finally like reached out and was able to find a treatment specialist for perimenopause, for menopause, to help me kind of get through that rough time. Because I suffer from major depressive disorder. I have an anxiety disorder, and all those things kind of get flared up, right? And can be a part of the menopausal journey. And so I just want to put a plug out there, like seek help if that's where you're at. You know, there are things that can make the journey through menopause and perimenopause a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's well said, Kelly. And you know, like, let's talk about another stressor. I had some questions from the group about this, like caring for others during your recovery. Like, how do you do that? You know, are you caring for either kids or even adult kids? How do you learn how to have a relationship with your adult children? Or maybe even when your parents are starting to be more dependent on you than you were on them. Any thoughts that you want to share about what your experience has been?
Yeah, you know, my kids were 8 and 13 when I went and went to a treatment center. And when I got out of treatment, I had to really look at changing how I did things. I had to have a lot of help from people because, you know, recovery really was my job. At that point in my life, and it was my main focus. But I still had kids to take care of and get to activities and feed them. My husband helped tremendously with food preparation. My friends helped get kids here and there to different things. And at first I felt very guilty, and I realized they wanted to help, right? They wanted to help. But one of the things I had to learn very quickly was, as you all know, our eating disorders don't just affect us, right? They affect everybody in our life. And my eating disorder, my drinking, all of those things had affected my kids and my husband. And I had to learn very quickly that I had to give them space and I had to give them grace to feel whatever they wanted to feel at that time. I couldn't, you know, say, okay, I'm on my recovery journey. Now you need to like be this for me, and you need to always accept me, and you always need to be happy for me, and you need to not bring me down, and all of these things, and you need to understand me. Well, I quickly learned it's a two-way street. My eating disorder had affected everybody in my family, and I had to learn they get to feel all of their feelings about how my eating disorder had affected them and our family. And as an example, my daughter, you know, when she was 16, it was kind of rough, you know, it was really rough. And she was extremely angry. And I came to learn through, you know, counseling, family counseling and everything, that she was terrified. She was terrified that her mom was going to get sick again if things got hard, right? And she didn't want to have the hope, right, that her mom was going to be better and feel better and be able to laugh and do things with them, and then maybe have a chance, like, you know what, she's going to get sick again. So she had a lot of fear. She had seen things that she shouldn't have seen, right, when I was living in my eating disorder, my alcoholism, and all of that to say that I had to give her the space and the freedom to express anything she needed to express. Same with my husband in our relationship, you know, that was a lot of work early on. And he had to feel like I heard him. I will say today, like my daughter and I, we're very close. All right. We've worked hard on our relationship. we're very close. She and her husband have 2 little kids. We text every day. We FaceTime every day. She asks, for my advice. I get to have a great relationship with her today because we worked on it hard. So I guess I want to say, like, don't give up, right? If you're having a rough relationship with a daughter or your son or your husband, because they can be repaired. They definitely can be repaired with work, understanding, and giving each other the space to feel feelings that they have.
Yeah, that's so inspirational. Thank you. And as somebody who works with family members too, and family members who are listening, I just want to give you a little hint. Even if your person right now is saying, I don't want you to worry about me, you've spent too much energy on me, it's important that you care. And deep down inside, there's this little part of every person who's trying to recover that wants you to care, even if they're not acting like they do, right? You're so important, a part of their life. And you don't have to be like the miracle worker who knows all the things and does everything just so. Seeing and acknowledging and saying, I see you're struggling. I want to be able to help you. Let me listen to what you have to say, what your thoughts are. That can go miles towards someone's recovery. One of the things that we know that helps folks is the feeling of connection, feeling loved and accepted and connected. And that this is also folks in midlife, you all are smart enough to read a book and figure out the things you need to do the things you want to do. But what's really super hard is to let in those emotions and those feelings of why recover, who's important enough for me to recover for, what do I want to recover for, and how do I want to share that recovery with my family. So please be a part of the healing. And for those of you who aren't sure your families can do it, send them to Bonnie. I'll teach them right about how to do emotion coaching. I do workshops and stuff. So I can totally help with that. And you're going to build stronger connections with each other. You can't recover in a vacuum. You just cannot recover in a vacuum.
Absolutely. I just want to follow up with, my family is so important to me today. And I didn't know how important they were to me when I was first starting out in recovery. But I have grown to know that they love me. I have grown to know that they'll always be there for me. And it can take time to get to that place where you have that kind of connection. But I just want to reiterate, like, don't give up. Like, don't give up. It can get better, and you can have really strong relationships in your family.
It's really amazing what can happen, right?
Absolutely.
Once the stuff gets out on the table too. So I don't know, Kelli, if you're ready to shift gears, we have a topic from the group about the idea of harm reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So harm reduction meaning it's a strategy, and this is with eating disorder treatment or folks who have substance use for chronic mental illness, that we're going to not shoot for recovered period, but rather to make the person not do worse damage to themselves. Or maybe the harm reduction plan is to get a little bit better to keep functioning, but the goal isn't necessarily to full recovery. And I'm really curious, Kelli, what your stance is on a harm reduction model.
Yeah, I can only imagine, like, someone in midlife being told that that's the strategy that's going to be followed. I want you to know that there can be hope, even if that strategy is offered to you. Because here's the thing: when I look at any stage of recovery in my life, the bedrock of it is willingness. So even if you have that strategy presented to you as an option, the harm reduction strategy, there has to be willingness even in that, right? Willingness to do that. And everybody has a starting place in their recovery journey, everybody. And everybody's starting place is different. And I think if that's your starting place, right? Harm reduction, working with a team on harm reduction, that's your starting place. And not only do you have to be willing even in that, it can change, you know, as things shift for you, you can decide, you know what? I want to give more of myself to this journey of wellness and not just stay in harm reduction. And as that willingness grows, you may be surprised that hope grows, right? And you want to chase after things rather than just being, just reducing harm to your body. But no, I want to become willing to kind of chase after some things now. So see it maybe just as a starting point. It's not an ending point. It's not a statement that there's no hope, because even in that, you have to have willingness to be in that point. But, and you can always change your mind, right? You can always change your mind. Like, you know, I don't think I want to just stay in this harm reduction. I want to move forward. I see some things in life that maybe could be good and that I want to be part of. So, you know, let hope and willingness be there even in that strategy, I guess, is what I would like to say. And, you know, that kind of moves into what I wanted to talk about next is choice, right? Every single day, I have a choice if I'm going to allow willingness to be in part of my day. Even now, 12 and a half years into my recovery journey, I still every day am faced with choices. I see recovery as a present tense word for me. I don't think recovery as an achievement, right? To someday, woo, I've achieved recovery. I can say past tense, I've recovered from eating disorder behaviors, okay? But present tense, recovery is the essence of who I am today and how I choose to live my life. An example, when things get stressful for me, if I am going through a hard time, those eating disorder thoughts that are usually almost always in the back of my head, right? They can migrate towards the front of my head more. And I start to ruminate on them and I start to think about them. And then I have a choice, right? Am I going to latch onto those eating disorder thoughts and act out those things, seeking some relief as they whisper, you know, to me, like, just do this. It used to work in the past. Well, those whispers failed to remind me of how bad things were when I totally engaged with those eating disorder thoughts and acted on them. So early in my recovery, and not so early, midway maybe through my recovery, I remember telling a doctor of mine that I felt like a failure in recovery because I wasn't able to banish, you know, all the eating disorder thoughts in my head. And I thought, I am not in recovery, living in recovery, if I still have eating disorder thoughts. And I'll never forget what he told me. He says, Kelli, thoughts come and go in your head, right? You cannot control what thoughts come in your head and go out of your head, but you do have control and you do have a choice over your behaviors. He says your recovery is defined by your behaviors. And I've always remembered that because it takes away the perfectionism that somehow I achieve recovery when I don't have any more eating disorder thoughts. And for me, that just hasn't been my story. I still have eating disorder thoughts in my head. There's still times that I struggle, but what I know now, right, is when those thoughts get revved up, I need to do what has worked for me every time, and that's reach out for help, reach out for connection, and to use my voice. Once I start to voice what's rumbling around in my head, the power of those thoughts kind of goes away, right? I've shared it with another person and I have the camaraderie of that connection. And it's kind of like, I'm not just stuck and isolated with the thoughts in my head. I am now shared it with another person who can kind of help carry that with me and they're greatly reduced when I use my voice and talk about them.
Yeah, I like what you're saying too about, you didn't directly say this, but you're also suggesting that there's the thoughts about the thoughts in your head, right? So there's so we oftentimes make our own suffering by giving ourselves judgment, criticism, perfectionism around, well, I shouldn't have that thought. You know, I'm a bad person for thinking that. And then we're just doubling down on pain. And the truth of the matter is, we can't take the contents of our mind and like take a little piece out and say, I don't have it anymore. It'd be super, there are some things I would like to forget. Let me tell you what, but we can't do that. The brain is additive, just like a Google review, it's additive. And you can make more experiences and more perspectives and things to make the thoughts that are painful seem less important, but we can't delete the contents of our mind. So I really like what you're saying there, and that your own experience with that is so helpful.
Yeah, and it has really made a difference, you know, when I was kind of given the okay that, wait, I don't have to make all my thoughts like, you know, I don't have to like get rid of all the eating disorder thoughts. They will get less, right? They kind of get pushed to the back of my head. But for me, I haven't been able to get rid of those thoughts. And then every day it becomes the choice, you know, do I act on them or do I not act on them? And there's so much power in choice. If I've learned one thing in my recovery journey, the power that's in knowing that I have choice, that's been so instrumental to me, right? I get to call the shots where I am, who I'm with, what I do, what I think about, you know, perseverate on. I get to call the shots on everything I do.
Yeah.
But I like what you said about judgment, because that's one of the hardest things for me, is not to judge myself. And, you know, I constantly need to be reminded, give yourself a break, Kelli, and not be so hard on yourself. I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemy in the sense that we judge ourselves very harshly.
Yeah, and think about that too. Like if you're going to therapy session or talking with a family member, if you're always sharing the most painful thoughts, guess what gets the most airtime? Right? So if you go to your therapist and say, you know, like, I don't want to be thinking these thoughts, and then the therapist doesn't understand that, like, maybe we shouldn't have that conversation for the 150th time, that we just enhance the negative thoughts by trying to problem solve the negative thoughts over and over and over again and trying to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be such a spiral.
Yeah. And in that sense, it almost becomes, the road to wellness becomes not only running away, so to speak, from the eating disorder and behaviors and thoughts, but it's a shift in perspective. I'm going to run towards the life that I envision. I'm going to run towards thinking of goodness. I'm going to run towards being one of my best own supporters, you know, not thinking judgmental thoughts. So for me too, that's just a subtle difference in how I see things. I'm not just running away from something, the eating disorder, I'm running towards the life that I can visualize and that I want.
Right. And it sounds like there's some acceptance there. Because another thing that I hear in group is like, oh, I've been struggling for so long. Is this ever going to go away? Am I ever going to get rid of this eating disorder? And so what I hear you saying is your goal was not to get rid of, but rather to just let it not be as important.
Yeah. And it's almost like a byproduct, right, of me seeking health and wellness and wholeness. It's almost like a byproduct that the eating disorder becomes less important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's, to me, it's perspective, and it's what I embrace. Instead of trying to beat myself down and beat the eating disorder away, the perspective of, I want to follow hard after what I want to be in life.
Yeah, right. So that, you know, our way into recovery is what I'm hearing is to make a decision every day. You were talking about that, and maybe remembering why.
Yeah,
Right? Why do this hard work in the first place?
yeah,
Why be in my body and eat food and not figure out how to get rid of it every day?
right. And for me, on those really, really hard days, and there's some hard days in recovery, isn't there? Not every day's easy. And I would say most days aren't easy, early on. I had to remind myself, like, why am I doing this hard work? Why am I choosing a different way? And one, like I said, it started out because of my husband and my kids. But then, kind of a transformation happens as I continued, like, no, I want to do this for me because there's so many things I want to do in wellness. And this is, Bonnie, this is something that I sometimes talk about is I am going to be 55 in a few weeks, but in many ways I feel like a teenager. And here's the reason why. I don't remember, some people are like, oh, I wish I could go back to how I was as a child, carefree. And I don't have that, right? My childhood was not good. It was not fun. Everything that I'm experiencing in recovery today as a middle-aged woman, it's kind of new and it's exciting. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I get to do this. I do a lot of hiking in the mountains. I garden, music. I love long conversations with my friends over coffee, something I was terrified to do, before recovery, because that was just too intimate of a setting. Playing with my grandkids. Honestly, I never thought that I would grow to be this age, right? That I would live to be this age, live this long. And that's where I was when I was 42 and decided to try, wellness and recovery. And I will say, not every day is fun now. In fall and winter of 2019, I had another episode of my major depressive disorder, and that was very hard. It was a very low time for me, and there's many reasons why, but I had to kind of go back to basics, and say, why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this? Is it worth it? And I had people in my life that were there to help me. So not every day is easy, but it can be exciting. I think I got off topic. What were we talking about, Bonnie?
We're talking about the way into recovery, and you're totally talking about it. You're talking about also about being seen, allowing yourself to have the feelings of intimacy.
Yeah.
And then, another thing is understanding without judgment. I know it's easier said than done, but
Yeah.
without judgment, like, what does my eating disorder do for me? Understanding the function of what an eating disorder does. Does it help me with difficult emotions? Does it keep my mind busy? Does it help me celebrate? What are the things that I am on? And it could be serve multiple functions. It doesn't, and it could change with the context of the situation. But just understanding what's happening and why you might go towards it puts enough space in between the feeling that you should engage in it, like the thought that's there, and the actual behavior. So you don't even have to have a grand plan or pull out, the worksheet on what you're supposed to do when you think about using your eating disorder. Putting space in between that urge and the acting on it is super key.
Yeah, I call it the gap, right? It's a gap. And what I will say, what I have learned in my life, as I continue to recover, right, and do the hard work of recovery, that gap gets larger. And what I have learned is what I find in that gap is the middle. It's not my black and white thinking, right? There's a myriad of possibilities. But what that gap, like Bonnie was saying, gives me is a pause, a time, like I'm not reactive as I was when I was in my eating disorder, or something quick to make me feel good, right? And creating this gap, like you said, really is done by understanding what the eating disorder does for me. And I've learned there's many things that my eating disorder has and wants to do still for me in my life. One of the things that I had to learn was it was extremely hard for me to use my voice to say what was going on inside of me. It was extremely hard for me to use my voice to express my needs. It was extremely hard to use my words to say what I was feeling. And I had to learn that one of the things my eating disorder was doing for me was speaking for me in a way, right? And if I needed nurturing, right, I would let my eating disorder speak for me in many ways, but that was one of the ones, using my voice. And here's something that I had to do very early on, because I thought you were like pulling out my teeth when it came time for me to like try to voice what was going on inside of me. It was so painful because I never had a voice growing up. I wasn't allowed to, it wasn't safe. With my husband and I, as we started to dialogue and try to work on things, it was so painful. I couldn't use my voice. And so I would write things down. I would write him a letter and I would hand it to him. You know, this is what I want to say to you. And sometimes I even had to leave the room while he was reading it. That's how ashamed I was, you know, of my feelings being read by him. And then it got to the point I could stay in the room and then I could read to him what I had written. And then it got to the point where like, I'm going to stumble around here a little bit, but I'm really going to try to tell you with my words what I'm feeling. And that was the process, how I found my voice. You know, I don't know if that's something that can help any of you, but that's the process that I had to use because it was so gut-wrenchingly painful for me.
Yeah, a great use of therapy time too, right? So if you're not ready to make that risk, like that's a big risk to find your voice with your most intimate partner.
Absolutely.
And you can start with a therapist with that. I remember one client that I used to see, she said her binging was about saying no, that she was very competent, worked very hard in her profession all week. And she would, on Friday night, that was her time to say no and slow down and not engage in anything because she had to be social all week long. And so there's, you know, every person is unique and how their eating disorder might speak for them. But I know it's a hard process to start to put words to it. And one step could be to, you know, start to articulate that in therapy. But I love your idea about writing it down first.
Yeah.
Right. So that can be, or I know that Eating Disorder Foundation has the art group too. Yeah. So for some people where there's no words, there could be pictures, or their music is another way that you might be able to start to express yourself.
Yeah.
So you wanted to talk a little, Kelli, about intentionality and keeping to things even when, you know, maybe you don't feel like it, as a way into recovery.
Yeah. I have found in my journey that being intentional I have to have intentionality. If I wait, like, you know, if I would have waited early in my recovery until I felt willing to do XYZ that I needed to do in recovery, I was going to be waiting a long time. And so I had to be very intentional and actually do things, right, that I knew were part of recovery before I even felt like they were, before I felt like I wanted to do those things. And I even lived my life today very intentionally. Sometimes to a detriment, you know, I can be not very spontaneous, but for me, I set aside a time every morning. That's kind of my sacred time, right? Where I'm just by myself. I'm thinking, I'm writing, I'm journaling, setting intentions for the day, not my to-do list, but intentions like, how do I want to show up today? How do I want to be in the world today? So my intentions isn't a to-do list. It's how I want to be. And my faith in God is very important to me and very strong. And so that time that I set aside every morning, I pray, I pray, I write, I journal, I think, but I have to set that time aside just for me every day. And I need that time. And I think too, being intentional is coupled with awareness. So one of the things I'm working on right now is still seeing how black and white thinking can show up for me when I don't even know it's there, right? And so what I'm working on right now and trying to be very intentional is being aware, right, of when that black and white thinking shows up, and I'm not looking at the myriad of possibilities in the middle. And this is kind of a side note, but it includes in this, I'm doing this with the help of a therapist. And I say that only to, I still need at this point somebody that I can check in with when I need to, right? For me, there is no shame in having connections with a therapist, even now 12 and a half years into my journey, because there's still things that I'm working on and there's still things that I need support on.
Yeah, we were talking together about how finding that trust in those individuals who, when you want to turn right and they think that you need to turn left, that you go, okay, I'll turn left because I trust you enough. Like, I know you have my best interests at heart. Yeah. Finding that team, and even if it's just one person on your team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And trust is such an integral part of connection, right? I'm not going to be connected to somebody closely if I don't trust them. Mm-hmm. And trust, I'm not a super trusting person. I am much more than I was early on in my life. I always second guessed people's intentions. And actions, and now I'm learning to just simply take people at their word and more, right? I'm still like, so that's another thing I'm working on, is learning to trust. But I'm telling you, the connections I have with people that I trust are beautiful, because I've been willing to bring them into my life and allow them to be part of me, to help me and support me, and I know that they want to be there.
Yeah. And then too, that maybe it's a therapist or clinician or even a family member that can walk you to the line, help you walk to the line and say, I think you maybe need to step off that line and walk a path forward. And I don't know if you want to share about your experience with that too.
Yeah, and it's a progress, it's not perfectionism. Just like recovery, earning trust and trusting people is definitely a progress. I know, and here's an example. I remember, Bonnie, when I worked with you early on in my recovery journey, sitting in your office more than one occasion, and we'd have this conversation. You would ask me, am I willing to give up the eating disorder? Ooh, that was a tough question, because you held me accountable to look at my willingness almost every time I saw you. Because for a long time I thought, I can hang on to parts of my eating disorder, right? I'll give up the yucky stuff. I'll give up the bad stuff, but I'm still going to hang on to this part of my eating disorder. And you really helped me see willingness. It always comes back to willingness, always. I believe, and what I've witnessed in my life is that a successful recovery journey always has to be built on willingness to look every day, and to embrace what recovery is and what that journey is. But the power of choice, you really helped me see that. I have the power of choice to be willing to seek after what I really want and who I want to be in this world.
Yeah, and for all of you clinicians out there, letting go enough to give your person that power of choice, or for family members to be like, they have to be able to fly on their own. And sometimes in all our love and good intentions, we want to like hold them really tight and prevent all the bad things from happening. But I tell you what, people with eating disorders are some of the strongest, most resilient, resourceful people I know. And they, you know, when they're doubting themselves, it might seem like they're fragile and they can't do it. But I have seen folks move mountains. Kelli, you've certainly moved several mountains in recovery, and I've never stopped believing in you. And I don't, and all of you who are out there, I 100% believe that you can do it. Never give up on yourself. Now, I will say that in life, I found that my timeline for how I want change to happen and when I think it should happen is never the same. You know, usually it takes longer, and I get frustrated and get impatient. But it is absolutely possible for you to be able to dip a toe in the water of recovery and change your mind, and dip another toe in, and pretty soon the temperature of the water might not feel as cold as it did at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, follow your heart too. You know, it's what is important to us and what we value that is going to help us get through the tough times, the journey ahead.
Yeah.
That's what this life is all about, doing the things that you love.
Right. And I want to, I want to share, my mind thinks a lot in word pictures and metaphors. And I want to share with you kind of how I value my recovery right now. First, I want you to know, like, I am not someone who has, who doesn't struggle. I still struggle with things, right? I still need help. I still, you know, have questions, and sometimes some days are better than others. But the gift of recovery is so important to me. And I just want you to know, like, being in midlife, we're not too old, right, to seek after something. And even if it takes us time to find that, it's still worth it. And the word picture that comes to my mind and that I use a lot for me that shows the value that I place on recovery, especially in midlife, for me and for all of you, is think about a buried treasure, okay? And somebody goes out and looks for the buried treasure and finds it in the first day or two. It's still a valuable treasure, right? And that person likes it and like, wow, this is a great treasure. Now think of a buried treasure that we go out and look for days, weeks, months, years, right? When we finally find that buried treasure, wow, it's not only valuable, it's like held in the highest regard, because it's taken us so long, right? And that's how I view my recovery. I view recovery that I have today, the messiness of it and everything, as a very valuable and highly regarded thing in my life. And it's probably one of the most important things in my life. Like, I will always do things that has recovery in mind, because it is such a valuable treasure. And I've looked so long for contentment, for peace, for joy. And now that I can feel those things, it's like, I don't ever want to give this up, and I'm going to cradle and I'm going to hold this treasure, and treat it extremely valuable.
I think that's a great way to pause our discussion and see if Sabrina has questions for us from the audience.
Absolutely. I have some amazing questions and just a lot of relating, a lot of connecting and just validating the feelings. And I'll just start with, I know you've spent some time even now in this later discussion about talking about willingness. And Bonnie, you said something about how sometimes things don't go according to your timeline and how we have to dip our toe in and we have to keep dipping our toes in. So a few questions have come through about how do we build our willingness? And if our eating disorder thoughts, if we've had them for 20 years already, for 25 or 30 years, sometimes it just feels like, where does that begin? And I don't know, what might we share with someone?
I like to say that progress, not perfection. So the thought of like, can I do recovery? Can I go into recovery? Usually people are trying to visualize the end game. How in the world am I going to get there? There's so many things. I can't even, my brain is really good at thinking about the why nots and wanting the answers to all those questions first. But maybe it's just a little bit of change. It's a 1 degree of change, and what you do can lead you to a very different point on the horizon. So that's where I would say willingness, willing to do 1 degree of change. What would you say, Kelly?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think my willingness went up and down every day, and it still does. You know, it's not a yes or no thing. It's kind of an ebb and flow thing for me. And I know early on, I had to look at the recovery journey because it looked completely overwhelming, right? Of everything that I needed to do to achieve wholeness and wellness. I had to break it down, like, just for today, what am I willing to do just for today? And that helped me kind of break it down instead of looking at the whole journey as a package. Like, I just have today. What am I willing to do today? And some days I was more willing than others, but asking myself that question really kept willingness in the forefront of what I thought and how I thought. And yeah, just being willing to look at it in smaller chunks and not perfection and this big looming recovery, you know, but just for today, what can I be willing to do?
Thank you both so much. Kelly, that's perfect. I'm going to segue into a few questions that we have on black and white thinking that you've mentioned a few times. And one of the things that stuck out to me that I really enjoyed you saying is sometimes we can live life so organized or rigidly or on a schedule that it's to a detriment, that there's no space for spontaneity, that then where does living come in? So with black and white thinking, and how I think a lot of people can relate to that in their every moment of every single day, what are some ways when you find that happening, or how do you recognize when you're in that, like, here kind of view?
Yeah, and like I said, sometimes I'm not even aware and I need other people to see it, right? Oh, Kelly, you've just given yourself 2 options, right? Black and white. You know, I'm good, I'm bad. I'm worthy, I'm not worthy. You know, those things. And or the situation is, it needs to go this way or this way. When in reality, bringing people into that conversation, right, has helped me not only identify my black and white thinking, but helped me to look at the myriad of possibilities of the middle that I just never would have even thought of, right? So for me, the best way that I address my black and white thinking is to bring other people in, right? And to do that, to bring other people into what I'm thinking is very black and white, I have to use my words, right? I have to say, this is what's really bothering me. This is how I'm thinking. And just talk this out with me, right? Talk this out, because, and they'll be like, whoa, 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 back up. You know, there's like a whole lot more you're not even looking at. And so for me, the piece to combat black and white thinking in my life, always, maybe not always, sometimes now I can start to do it myself, right? Like I said, I'm working on that right now with my therapist, becoming more aware, like, there I am again, black and white. But the best way that I know to combat black and white thinking in my life is to bring other people in, because the other people bring the middle in and even point out that I'm trapped up in that black and white thinking again. So again, it takes willingness on my part to speak about it and what's going on in my head. And it takes willingness to hear what other people have to say and take that in and think about it and muse it over in my head.
You know, so interesting about black and white thinking is we actually teach it. Like we teach how to learn about the world, about the framing and opposites, right? So we teach when kids are little, those of you who have young kids that are learning language, we say, what's the opposite of hot? It's cold. And what's the opposite of black? It's white, warm, not, not warm, whatever. But so that's how our brains start to organize the world and make sense of it. So please do not shame yourselves if you do think of the opposite. When somebody suggests something and you think of the opposite, it is something that we train and how to think about the world. And I like what you're saying is bring in other people to help you to think of other solutions. And also I would challenge, if you don't have that other person, hold your hand up. And if black is your thumb and white is your pinky, can you think of 3 other ways of looking at it? Not that you have to commit to them being the way that you feel or the way that you want to own for yourself, but just thinking 3 other ways that maybe another person, so you can imagine those other people that you go to for help with that.
Yeah, that's really good.
All right, I'm trying to condense some questions together because we have so many excellent ones. So a few comments about really appreciating even this, right, this setting in this workshop that we're talking about midlife. And then if, a few of our attendees this evening are saying, hey, I'm in my 70s, I'm right midlife and beyond that. And so how, when both of you were discussing throughout that recovery is possible and that, okay, even midlife or beyond, no matter what age, no matter what gender, right, really kind of breaking down all this that really makes people feel isolated and separated, because there's so many things in life that can lead us to feeling like, well, everyone has this happening that's similar, but I'm different. So can both of you just add a little bit more about, okay, what if we're saying I'm 70 years old, I've been struggling my whole life, like this is all I know. Mm-hmm. And what if at this point, maybe there isn't family, right? That at some point, the willingness or the motivation or the help that can come from family members, some of that might not be there for some of our attendees and members and people who are struggling. So can both of you touch on this a little bit more about how do we continue shifting that story, that if we're at a different point in life, that maybe this isn't for us?
Well, I think a great way to do that, Sabrina, is to come to Eating Disorder Foundation groups. You'll find other people who are in their 70s and beyond. Yeah. It's, I don't give up on yourself. Like some of my, I've treated folks that are well into their 80s and who have found recovery. So it's never too late to have a different experience of life. It really isn't.
Yeah, and I just want to say, no matter what age we are, if we're 14 or 54 or 84, we still are experiencing life in this moment, right? In this day. And to realize like I get to have a say in how I experience life right even in this moment, in this day, no matter how old I am, right? That lends itself to possibilities and to considerations that, well, if I don't really like the space I'm in right now, then what could I do, or what could be possible, right? So I think also looking for similarities, right? Instead of isolating and thinking I'm so different from everybody and my story is so unique. I'm 84 years old. Nobody understands me. I know when I went to treatment, everybody was younger. There was one other person. Everybody was younger. And I was like, these people don't understand me. I don't understand them. Right. But I was encouraged to say, find points of connection where we can be the same, you know, where we're the same. And it always came down to, I'm a human being, you're a human being, regardless of our age. So if I was speaking to a person that's 80 years old that has an eating disorder right now, I'd be like, we're very much the same. We're very much the same. We have the same emotions, right? We have the same time in each day. There's so many things that we're the same in. And I was really encouraged, you know, early on in my recovery when I thought nobody gets it because I'm different from all these people, was to look for similarities. And like Bonnie said, those similarities become very apparent when you belong to a group, like at EDF. You will find people of all ages, but people maybe in your cohort, you know, your group, your age, that like, oh yeah, other people get it. So no matter our age, we can always find similarities. Same emotions, you know, a lot of same life experiences. So look for the similarities. You know, that's what I have to do in other people. If I think, oh, they don't get me, or they're different, they're younger. We're different, but yet there's some things that make us very much the same.
Yeah, we all have hearts.
Mm-hmm.
That was, yeah, really lovely, Kelli. Thank you. I'm constantly learning things from everyone, and I'm very blessed that I get the opportunity to talk with people from so many different areas in their lives, and so many different areas on this world. So there are just endless things that can expand our perception. And that's such an incredible way to do it, is to find community. I think that's a big key thing, like taking away in what you're both sharing. I know we have barely just a moment left. I've had a lot of questions about, Kelli, how someone might be able to connect with you. I've sent your blog out, so hopefully I'll resend that in the chat and people can use that. And Bonnie, if you know, what services are you providing? So I'm going to put, again, both of your links in the chat, but can both of you, give us like a 60-second lowdown on what it is that you can provide for people?
Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah, well, so you can find me on eatingdisorderintervention.com. I'm a clinician licensed in Colorado. I can do individual therapy, family therapy, and I'm also a trained interventionist, a certified ARISE interventionist, which has a national scope. So I can help folks get into treatment, but that's not all we do. We help you once you're in treatment, to stay in treatment, and to work with the family system to be essentially your strongest point of contact through your recovery journey. So, and working with families is something that I absolutely love to do, and also work with individuals as well.
Well, I don't have all those letters after my name as a professional in the eating disorder world. But I do have a website. It's called Redemptive Recovery. And if you go there, you'll find, a podcast I've been on, and I have a lot of articles I've written, a lot of blogs that I've written. And there's also a place there where you can reach out to me and we could email back and forth. And it really is my lived experience that recovery is possible. And I never thought it was. I never, ever thought I'd be living the life that I live now. So it really is my passion to pass on to people, like, you know what, it can happen. It can really happen. And so to support and encourage people, that's what I like to do.
Oh, and let's not forget Tuesdays, 4 p.m. Mountain Time. The Eating Disorder Foundation's 50+ group. I think it's the only one of its kind in the whole wide world. And we have people from all over the world that join us. And I would love to see you all there. And I'll just plug it right now in case you're feeling like donating, that the Eating Disorder Foundation relies on donations from all of you. They do fabulous work. How many people have you reached this year, Sabrina? It's like with the support groups, it's, oh my gosh, the reach has been astronomical.
Yeah, it almost doesn't sound like it's a real statistic, but our signups have increased 1,030%. So we went from, in the past having about 22 new members sign up each month, and now we regularly have over 200. Yes.
Yeah,
So
that's incredible. And we couldn't do this without the help of donators. So thank you. It makes the programs like this possible. And really, really have enjoyed my time at Eating Disorder Foundation. And so Tuesdays, 4:00 Mountain, write it down.
Yes.
What about
Yes.
Yeah. And Sabrina, I just want to say again, thank you so much for making this possible and allowing me to share and with Bonnie. And, really, recovery is possible. Reach out, find people, sign up for that Tuesday, 4 p.m. Mountain Time, was it?
That's right.
For that group, because we can't do this alone. We weren't meant to do recovery alone. So reach out for help.
That's right. Thank you both so much. Just to remind everyone, this will be sent out tomorrow, this recording. So if you feel like I need to listen to that again, there was so much that I want to take away and remember, I will hopefully get this sent out to everybody tomorrow. And when I do that, I'll go ahead and put the direct link to register for that 50+ group.
Right.
And I'm getting more questions that I'm going to answer in that follow-up email. How can I support EDF? How do I find other resources if you're looking for a higher level of care, or if you're wondering, do I need a higher level of care? So we want to stay connected, and we want to make sure everyone's questions are answered. Thank you, Kelli. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, everyone, for spending the time for yourself to be here and know that there's an entire community supporting you.
Thank you so much. You can do it. Recovery is possible. I believe in all of you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.